I'm James Demer, the audio nomad, and today we're speaking with John Park, who's a brilliant IEM designer who's designed some of the most iconic IEMs in the industry, such as the Monarch Mark II. We're going to find out what makes John tick and how he got so good at designing IEMs. So JP, thanks for coming on the Audio Nomad. We actually met each other, I believe, at the Consumer Electronics Show in 2023, and that's where I got to learn a little bit about your prowess as a genius IEM designer. I think I want to know a little bit more about like your love of music as a child. Like, did you start out as a music lover, or when did you become, an audiophile?
Yeah, so growing up, I wouldn't call myself a musician, but I've played a lot of instruments. Probably the one that I played the most was the viola. I've been playing that ever since elementary school, so almost, I don't know, more than 15 years now.
Oh,
So I've been doing classical music all throughout up until college. And then during that time, I don't remember, but I somehow got into audio recording. So I had a lot of like talented musician friends who sang and played instruments. So we kind of used to do like a little bit of like home audio recording where I would record them. And at that time, I got really into different like gears, like microphones. And I built my own like ribbon microphone at that time. So kind of my gear collecting, I think, started there. And at the time, I'm not a professional or anything. It was just a hobby. But I would still go out collect different types of like preamps and whatnot. And I was introduced to hi-fi audio for the first time, I think, during that time, which was around in high school. And the first, I guess, high-end audio, like headphones and any IEMs I had were the Sony, I don't know, it's the V6. It's what all the studio musicians were using at the time. And then my real first IEM at the time was the Shure SC535, I think. They were the three driver little IEMs. So that's what I've been using basically since high school up until grad school, I guess. So around up until 2018. And at that time, actually, it's a funny story. So I really liked the Shure so much. And I was worried, what if like they break? I wanted like a backup IEM, something that's cheap. So actually the first thing that I ever looked at was the KZ AS10. It was like a 5 balance armature, and I think it was like $30 at the time. But it was something that was cheap enough, and something that people seemed to say was good. And as I was researching that KZ product and figuring out which store to buy, that's, I think, I was looking up audio reviews about them. And then I think at that time I came across Bad Guy Good Audio Reviews, HBV. I think he did a review on them, and I saw the video, and then I saw his other videos, and I was like, oh wait, for $100 more, I could get something else that seems to be better according to him. And then maybe for just $200, apparently I can get something that's even better than my Shure's. So I think that's how I got into the rabbit hole. And that's how I got connected with Linso Audio, who I work for right now. So yeah, that's kind of the rabbit hole I went down.
yeah, it's
And
amazing how that happens. You start with something that is fairly inexpensive and seems pretty good, and then you just say, well, for
yeah,
a couple dollars more I could get something better.
and it
But
just racks up.
how did you actually learn how to tune an IEM?
Yeah, so I bought a few IEMs from Linso. I liked some of them, I didn't like some of them. And at that time, I think Clinical was also really ramping up his graph database. And then I don't know how, I think it was HBB. He was at that time starting to measure not graphs. I think he was just doing like sound tests where he would record the IEM into like a cheap little dongle microphone and he would put
Yeah.
it on YouTube.
Yeah, I remember
And
that.
I got that idea and then I kind of like played around. And as I was doing that, I think somehow I came across Clinical's page and his
Yeah.
graph database and his rankings.
I think
And
Critical started with that little Dayton audio mic too. That
yeah,
little
yeah.
plug-in. Yeah. Is that what you used as well?
No, I didn't even have that much. Like at the time, I really like it's really I have a humble beginning. Like I don't even know what microphone. It was some microphone I found from some component somewhere. It was small enough, and I stuck a
Uh-huh.
little PVC like rubber tube on it, and I would
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
stick
the
the nozzle
tube.
in,
Yeah, yeah.
and
And then
that's
what
how
were
I.
you using? What were you using as your software to measure?
Oh, at the very beginning, it wasn't even a software. I would just put record on my like on my like a record a video and just take the audio from that. Or actually, no, at that time I think I was using Logic on my computer.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's how I got into graphs in the very beginning. And I think what I did was I was looking at Clinical's rankings, and there were some IEMs that I heard, some that I haven't heard. And what I did was I took all of his best ranked IEMs that were like S or A plus, and I took their graphs, and then I started comparing the graphs side by side. I think I still have a photo of it somewhere where like it's just a sheet
Oh.
and I have
Oh
graphs, graphs,
yeah.
graphs, graphs. And
Yeah,
I'm
this
looking
was
at
before
them.
they had that comparison
No,
tool, I would
yeah, this is all
imagine.
manual. So I was just
Yeah.
looking at them. I was like, okay, so this what is that Q Anole VX? Who made that
Oh
Q?
yeah. Yeah,
I don't remember.
the
Q something.
oh shoot, the Anole VX, what was that? Yes.
So, anyways,
I
I
could,
would like
yeah.
take all of them. Like, okay, so
That
people
was like
really,
his favorite for a long
yeah.
time. Yeah.
But I mean, the industry's gone so far ahead now. Like, I don't even remember the
Yeah.
brand. But I would take different IEMs that he ranked best, and some of them I heard, some of them I haven't. I would look at the graphs and I would see, okay, so this has this much mids or this much bass, and all of them. I started to look for things that everyone liked about the IEM, and things that
Yeah.
people didn't like. And what I noticed was that all of these best ranked IEMs, they have kind of a, if not neutral, then slight, like a very slight V shape on the mids. They have kind of a
Mm.
clear sub bass region, and then they have a certain shape of the treble that decays. And from there, I kind of started like drawing, okay, what is my target? What would I prefer? And I think that's how I first got into, I guess, designing an IEM.
Yeah.
And I would play around with EQ, try to get that and see, okay, this is good. I don't like this. But yeah, I basically Clinical and HBB, they really helped me get into all of this, whether they know it or not.
Yeah. Did
And
you ever
then
speak with them? Did you try to communicate with them in
no,
any way?
I
No, you
was
just,
actually a big fan of HBB at that time, and I
yeah.
don't think he knew. I don't know if he knows who I am now. I don't think he knew who I was back then.
Yeah.
I was on his Patreon list, and then Clinical, I only spoke to him once. It was a group chat from somewhere, audio
Yeah.
discourse. They did a video call once, I think.
They
Um,
both definitely influenced my growth in the IEM industry
yeah,
as well. And I mean, I bought my first pair of IEMs and custom IEMs. Well, I bought my first pair of Etymotics in the early 2000s, maybe 2001, 2002, and then customs in 2005, I think, from Ultimate Ears. But like you said, it was like your Sures. They sounded great, and I thought they were amazing until I heard something better, and it just kept going from there.
yeah,
So you played the viola when you were young, you still play, and then you were building ribbon mics. So you have an aptitude for electronics and tinkering, and you're curious. How did you start, cracking IEMs open and actually changing the way they sound?
Yeah, so just from my previous, like I was really into like actual studio monitor speakers. I went through a lot of them. So I had a basic idea, okay, different types of drivers are allotted to different frequency ranges for certain reasons. And then when I started looking at IEMs, looking at the graphs, figuring out, okay, they all seem to have a similar style of tuning, and this is what people say is the best. I wanted to see, okay, how do I manipulate the drivers to get there? So I looked, it's very rudimentary. I looked on YouTube, I looked on the internet, and I read a few books about like very basic, like how to make crossovers, what kind of crossovers are there, how do you calculate the crossover values. So that's how I learned about, first order, second order, how do you get a specific, tighten some regions of the frequency. So I got all that theory basically from the internet. And then I wanted to try to test that, okay? Because I mean, it was all just theory, it was just all number. It was actually a lot of math at that point. But I wanted to see, okay, how do I actually translate that to a graph? And I think I got this from speaker crossover DIY groups online. But I saw people were using a software called XSim. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
still out there or not. But
Yeah.
basically, it's a rudimentary like engineering software where you can put a speaker. It lets you like invert the polarities and whatnot. It'll let you add capacitors, resistors, inductors, and you can change the different values. So I started playing around with that, figuring out, okay, if I have a certain speaker and I add a capacitor to it, it makes a high pass. Or if I put a resistor on it, it makes a low pass. Or if I combine it in certain orders, it'll make a different order of the band pass. So that's how I started playing around with IEM designs, and then at the same time, I figured out, okay, these specifically balanced armature manufacturers like Knowles and Sonyan, they have data sheets for each of their driver types online. And then I figured out you can take a SPL of like the frequency response graph of a specific driver. And then there's another software, I think it's like VXCAD or something. It's another like CAD software. But you can put that image in and kind of assign what are the X and Y values on the graph, and then draw a trace line, just roughly, and then convert that into a text file that you can use, put it into the XSim, and test around. So that's how I first started designing IEMs, where I would take the frequency response from the balanced armature manufactured pages, put it in the XSim, and then start adding capacitors, combining drivers, and figuring out, okay, so if I take this woofer and put a certain value of resistor, combine it with some other full range drivers. So that's how I got started. But at that time, it was still all basically theory. I haven't actually like played around with components.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. Because so you're doing a lot of theory at this point. It's all theoretical, and I would imagine essentially free. And then at a certain point, you have to start buying components and graphing and actually listening to the things that you're creating. Can you tell me a little bit about that process?
So for that, so once I started getting an idea of how these things work, I designed a specific kind of like a configuration of drivers and components where I thought, okay, this makes theoretically a good graph that I would like. And I started reaching out to different manufacturers, both Chinese as well as the in Europe and America. And some of them, they straight out like be like, no, that doesn't work. Most companies were like that. But then I did receive some good responses and good help. And most of it was basically that, I didn't realize at the time, but it's all theory. When I actually build the IEM, it might look like that, it might not. So that's when I went on Mauser, and I ordered, I think at the time I ordered at least $3,000 worth of like components, just resistors, capacitors, different Knowles and Sonia drivers.
And just so people know, Mauser is like it's an online electronics
Yeah.
like store, like
They sell everything.
DigiKey,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
you can get like resistors, capacitors, you name it, they sell it. Switches.
And then I bought my first microphone from AliExpress. At that time people were using the metal ones. I don't know. It's like 6038 IEC. I think Android recommended something to me, so I got that.
Okay.
And then at that time, and then those came with specific like tubes where you can directly attach each specific balance armature drivers directly and measure it. That's when I figured out, okay, different tube lengths affect the drivers differently.
Yeah.
The dampers affected where you put the dampers, the tube diameters. So I started playing around with everything. I built a bigger and bigger and more realistic database. And at that time, I was still playing with XSIM and simulating things. And the first ever IEM that I physically built, it was a 6-driver IEM. I built this the beginning of 2019. And at that time, I had gotten like in-ear molds from like a local hearing aid shop. I bought the UV acrylic. I built it. It sounded good. I liked it. And that's when I passed off this design to Linsol. And it didn't make it into anything. But then once I actually figured out, okay, I can actually solder these things together. I know how to make it work. Yeah, ever since then, I've been cracking open every IEM sample I've received. And right now, so basically how I work with Linsol is that they'll send me different prototypes of different IEMs that they want to release. I'll crack them open and I'll rewire it. I'll change some of the tube lengths or the diameter. The drivers, change out some of the different capacitors or resistors, get a graph and get a sound that I think is good for that IEM. And then I'll either send the designs to them or I'll ship the IEM back to them and then they'll test it. They'll see whether, we like this or we don't like it. And then we'll kind of go back and forth and finalize the different models that we have now.
So when you're working with companies, and I think you work for, I know you work for Linsol, but do you design for anyone else?
No, just Linsol's brands. Linsol. Yeah.
So and that's thieaudio, Kiwi Ears,
Zgot. They have a few, Zgot. Stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah. So do they say to you like, hey, this is this sort of style of tuning that we're going for this particular IEM, or do they just kind of give you carte blanche to do what you want to do?
So yeah, that's I have a personal preference, and everything that I touch, I try to get it close to something that I like. And it's worked in the beginning when we first released the Monarch and Clairvoyance, and the early thieaudio stuff. And up until that time, there was a specific style of tuning I was going for where, you have that 200 hertz sub bass, and then you have that completely flat mid range, and then, a treble. Up until then, most people were still making like very V-shaped muddy bass IEMs. Yeah. And the reason for that was, at least in the Chinese world, the manufacturing world, for some reason they believe that full range balance armatures or even dynamic drivers, you shouldn't be using a capacitor more than 6 microfarads, which makes, it doesn't give enough for the actual mid range. And when I first suggested to different brands, hey, you need to increase the capacitor you're using on these drivers by a lot more, a lot of them were like, no, you can't do that. It doesn't work like that. So Linsol gave me the first opportunity to test that. And then we figured out, yes, you can do it. It sounds good. It sounds better. And the first IEMs that came out that had the flat mids, I think the first one I would give credit to is the Viento in Korea, the high
Yeah,
edition
high edition.
Viento.
Yeah.
Well, completely unrelated. But then the actual first Hi-Fi that did that was Fearless Dawn by Critical.
Yeah. That was
Yeah.
Critical. That was the Fearless that Critical tuned, the Dawn.
Yeah. That was the
Yeah.
first one that had the flat mids. And then I think I would say the second Hi-Fi then were the Monarch and the Clairvoyance,
Yeah.
which came a little bit after that.
Yeah. So did you design the Monarch and the Clairvoyance? They were like revolutionary when they came out. They kind of took the world by storm.
No, so I can't take, like, I didn't design it ground up. It was the same thing where they sent me a sample. At that time, it was a very V-shaped, very typical Hi-Fi signature.
Yeah.
And then I took it apart. I re-soldered different capacitors, and I shipped it back to them. It was kind of, again, that back and forth, and then we arrived to that design.
Yeah.
So I would say I retuned it. I didn't design it ground up.
Right. And is that true for the Monarch Mark II as well?
Yeah, almost everything up until now, most of the things I've done is just retuning.
It's kind of fascinating. Like, so I think of you as like a mastering studio. Like my friend Bob Ludwig owns Gateway Mastering Studio, and he doesn't actually record the bands, but he just makes them sound really, really good before the album gets released. And that's sort of what you do, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I guess. My main thing is I actually really don't like physically building IEMs.
Yeah.
It gets really messy. You know, my hands aren't good enough for that right now. So that's why I prefer to just take apart things that they send me, so that I don't, especially the tubing, it gets really just messy. I don't like doing that. So,
well, it's amazing, talking about the complexity of an IEM. You have mechanical tuning like tubing and dampers, and then you have electronic tuning like with crossovers and components, and then you have the actual cavity, not so much with balanced armatures, but with dynamic drivers, you have the physical space that the IEM, that the driver is in within the IEM. So it's really, there's sort of three major tuning components. How do you find synergy between the three types of tuning?
There are things that affect the overall sound and tuning more than others. So for balanced armature drivers, the actual shell enclosure, it doesn't affect it at all. At most, if it's an open ventilated balanced armature driver,
Right.
just whether you have enough ventilation, whether there's a hole or not, basically in the shell, that affects the bass a little bit.
And an open balanced armature is one that doesn't have a tube connected to it?
No, it has a tube, but then the housing of the balanced armature, there will be like a little bit of a hole, a vent. Yeah.
The little box. Yep.
Yeah,
Got it.
It'll let the air flow in.
Okay. So then you need to have a hole in the shell so that air has somewhere to go. And
dynamic drivers too, like they're a lot more affected by the ventilation, how much airflow you have. So one of my limitations is, especially since I'm not in China, I don't have access to different components, especially with dynamic drivers, because that really affects the driver performance and the sound, how they build the actual dynamic driver, how much space there is within the actual chamber within the driver, what material they're using, what voice coils they're using. So I don't have access to that. So I only work with whichever drivers that Linso can send me. So the most I'll do with dynamic drivers is I'll change out. So in the back of dynamic drivers, there's a little, like a mesh sticker, and that will change how much airflow, whether you use a thicker sticker or whether. So I'll play with that, but most of the times I don't actually work or deal with the dynamic driver. This is true for most like specialized drivers, like the bone conductors or the piezos. Yeah.
Did you have anything to do with the new bone conduction IEM that thieaudio just released?
So how it works usually with these a lot of the brands, including thieaudio, is we'll workshop together. They'll send me something that they think is good and they think is ready, and then I'll take it apart and I'll look at it and I'll say, oh, I think this value should be something else. I think you should use something else, and I think the tuning should look like this. And then it'll be like a few rounds of going back and forth, them saying, we agree with that, or maybe we prefer it a little bit like this. And then I'll kind of give my feedback again, like that. So with the origin, the thieaudio origin, which is the new IEM you're talking about, we're kind of still in that phase where we're still trying to work out what's the best sound that we can get.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the bone conductor, I didn't pick the driver. I didn't engineer the driver itself, but
yeah,
it's I think it's actually probably the first of its kind yet when it's released.
Okay.
It's not like the mest that used to
Unique Melody Mest,
yeah.
which was the sort of the first company to use a bone conduction in an IEM.
Their bone conductor driver, it's a different type. The one that the thieaudio using, it's actually I don't have it with me, but through the shell you can see how big it is, and it's super thick.
Okay. Yeah.
And I tried where like I took everything apart and I only played through the bone conductors. Yeah. And they actually, you can feel it vibrate. And they actually sound like those old aftershocks, or
it
was like one of these like.
Yeah.
So it's a very similar driver to that. So it's very textural.
Okay.
But you need to be very careful because it does add a lot of distortion if you don't tune it well. So we're working together right now to kind of see what's the best balance where you can get that textural benefit without compromising the resolution or the quality of the sound.
Okay. And what do you think? How are you feeling about it?
It might be one of my favorite from thieaudio so far. I don't know if it's released the configuration. I think it's a 1DD, 4BA, 2 ESD, and then 1 bone conductor. So
what frequency is that bone conduction driver actually working in?
I would actually say technically it is a full range driver. If you just play by itself, it'll give you a full range. But we are focusing specifically for the mid-range and treble, lower treble, so around 400 hertz up until 5-6 kilohertz.
Okay.
That's what I think kind of gives the best texture without too much distortion.
Yeah.
So my opinion on it, it is I think one of my favorite right now. That's what I listen to every day these days. The actual core of the mid-range, it's only driven by 4 balanced armatures, and one of them is a tweeter, so basically 3 balanced armatures. So in terms of the resolution, it's not as resolving as the Monarch, but the bone conductor, it adds so much texture, and I don't know how, but it adds this kind of like 3D spatial. It really makes the soundstage. It's one of the best sound stages I've heard in our IEM. So that's what's keeping me hooked on it.
Yeah. I heard a prototype when I was in Shenzhen in June, and it was special. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing the final production model.
It's evolved, I think, quite a bit from there. So we'll see what we can come out with.
Okay, cool. What's the IEM that you'd say you're most proud of to date? I think about the thieaudio Monarch Mark II, which Critical, who's one of the greatest IEM measuring. I think about the thieaudio Monarch Mark II, which Critical rated, as his number 1 IEM as being a really exceptional product that you designed or that you tuned.
My favorite is gonna be the original Monarch and the Clairvoyance, I guess, because that was when we first. And I don't want to take the credit because I definitely think Critical he was a huge role in the industry.
Mhm.
But I think when we released the Monarch and Clairvoyance, I actually think we changed the mindset of especially the HiFi audio community, but not only
Yeah.
HiFi, but also Western IEM producers. Because again, you have to think back at the time, except for the Viento and Dawn came out almost just around that time, I remember.
Right.
Except those two.
I remember. It's the QDC and
QDC,
QDC.
yeah, Anole AVX.
Yeah.
But even that, and it's even like European and American manufacturers, they were still making IEMs that had really a lot of mid-bass bloat. It was like kind of like a V-shaped up to the bass, and that's because they were basically using woofers as a mid-range driver, a full-range driver. And even when I started working with thieaudio, I came in right after they released the V14, which was also a really bassy IEM.
Yeah, that was 14 all balanced armature set.
When I came in at that time, I had to convince thieaudio and the R&D team there. Like, I had to convince them so much. No, you have to do this to make this mid-range flat. You have to cut the subwoofer at a more sharper, lower frequency range. You have to make the full range drivers higher capacitor value. And they were like, no, you can't do that. It will make too much distortions. You can't do that. And I'm like, no, you can. You just have to tune it like this. So it was a lot of back and forth. But when we finally, and I mean, and I'm grateful to them too, because I actually think I give them a lot of headache just because how much back and forth we have to do for each model. But at that time, I think they gave me some trust. And it was a leap of faith, I guess, for them in me to release that model as we designed it. And that was the first proof of concept that, yes, you can have a flat mid-range. It sounds better objectively, I think. And for me, all IEMs should be monitors. It's inherent in the name. They're monitors. They should be studio monitor-like, which means, even though we, as consumers, a lot of consumers mostly use IEMs, they're initially meant for musicians and audio engineers, for them to have a true reference, a neutral reference to the sounds that they're hearing. So that's my goal when I retune all of the IEMs. I want to make it as faithful of a monitor as I can. And that was our first proof of concept that, yes, with the Monarch and Clairvoyance, we can have this style of tuning. And ever since then, you see a lot of these Chinese manufacturers, they change their tuning style. Even KZ has, I think, kind of come around with their CCA products. They're starting to make products that have that sub bass, the flat mid range, and then that slightly sloping treble.
I agree. You're a real pioneer in creating that sound, and kudos to you and to Linsol for introducing the world to IEMs that are, as you say, monitors, reference quality, but still have a musicality that's fun and engaging.
And again, I don't want to take all the credit because Critical's Dawn, that was a big... Actually, Critical's Dawn was my first proof of concept that this style of tuning can happen and it can work.
So you actually were instrumental in helping to master the Dawn to create the final tuning for that?
No. I meant like when I saw the Dawn released, that was the first kind of the 200 hertz shelf mid-range. So I saw that at the time. I was like, oh, we can also do that.
Yeah, that was Critical's idea, and then you grabbed onto it and ran with it. What do you think the future? What do you think the future is for IEMs? I mean, it's crazy how fast they've changed and evolved in the last 5 years. It makes my head spin. What do you think is in the future? Is it driver technology? Is it radical new tunings? Where do you think we're going?
So, I still tune and retune IEMs these days, but maybe for the past year, I've been a little bit more busy with my schoolwork.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about that. So where are you now?
So I'm originally from California, but right now I'm in South Korea. I'm pursuing my PhD in neuroimmunology. So completely different. And for me, IEMs are just a hobby. So yeah, that's what I'm doing full time.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I'm quite busy with schoolwork. I'm trying to publish a paper soon. So I don't really hop on the audio communities a lot. But I've been noticing a trend where I've seen a lot of. I'm guessing these are newer people that have entered the hobby. There's a lot of talk about how certain like the monarch kind of style of tuning is too boring. Everything's like that now. Why don't we have more diversity in tuning? And for me, I think maybe in that sense, I'm a little bit old school. As you said, this hobby has only been really booming for the past less than 8 years, I think.
Yeah.
And we've seen so much growth in the last 4 or 5 years to the point where people entering, we've kind of, I think, with this tuning, we've created a norm that people are
Yeah.
kind of being like, it's too boring. Even though
Yeah.
for me at least, I remember when we didn't have any other options where it was all just muddy bass.
I think what's interesting now are, I feel like enthusiasts in our hobby are owning multiple sets, and they'll use one particular set for a type of music or for a feeling that they want to have when they're listening, and that's kind of fun. So you can have different styles of tuning. I feel like I do that a little bit.
Maybe I don't know what the case for every member of the audio community in Discord and whatnot, what their situation is. But so, anyways, I was kind of trying to get at that. Like, we've kind of gone full circle in terms of tuning and what tuning preferences people like. So, in terms of the future, there's only so much you can do with tuning. Um, and I think, in my personal opinion, I think with the tunings that we have right now, we've kind of almost finalized, like this is, what is natural, what is neutral, what most people like. Oh, and from there we can increase the bass if people want more bassy. We can decrease it if people want more neutral tunings. In terms of treble, we've experimented a lot in the last 3 or 4 years. We had the first planar IEMs like the Tin HiFi P1 2.
Yeah, the P1.
We've experimented with like really, really too much treble extension. Even the ESTs, especially like with our model, the Prestige, we've kind of experimented. What is too much? What is enough? What do people prefer? So I think even with the treble, we kind of plateaued where we figured out what people prefer, what is natural sounding. So I think with tuning as an industry, there's only so much more we can do with tuning. So I really think
Yeah.
it comes down to driver technologies.
Right.
And what's amazing is that in the last 4 or 5 years, the Chinese manufacturers, I think they surpassed Western manufacturers in terms of innovating. We see more. I mean, first of all, most of the drivers from that Western manufacturers that they're using, they're coming out of Chinese factories. But these Chinese factories are now the ones that are manufacturing new types of drivers, like
Yeah.
the bone conductors, even the planars. They were the first to do that. The AMT drivers that one of them using.
Yeah, AMT gold planar with that AMT driver IEM. It's incredible.
So I think, I think we are going to see a lot more of driver innovations from
Yeah.
China, and I think that's what's going to be driving the industry going forward.
Okay. Well, I can't wait to see what fun drivers you get to play with in the future.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick, did you have anything to do with the thieaudio Hype 4?
Yeah, so all the Hype series, I've helped them retune it. They
Yeah.
look a lot different when I first got it.
I think the Hype 4 is probably one of my most favorite IEMs of late. It's truly incredible, and the price point that it comes in at is also phenomenal. Just a few years ago, you'd never imagine that you could get an IEM for $400 that sounds as good as the Hype 4.
Yeah,
That was well done. Nice work.
thank you.
Is there anything else you want to add? Is there anything you want to say before we wrap this up, JP?
No, just that I'm really grateful to I don't think I say it enough. I don't really, so I don't directly talk to the Chinese manufacturers. I go through Lillian and Steven at Linsol.
Yeah.
But I do want to thank them. I want to thank the manufacturers for, without them hearing my ideas 5-6 years ago, I wouldn't be here. And I don't think we would have some of the great IEMs that we have today. So I'm grateful for them for listening to me and giving me the opportunity. And I'm grateful, for Clinical HBB. They were one of the OGs that really got me into the hobby. So I'm grateful for their work so far. I think, let's see. I think most of the excitement going forward is going to be through driver technologies. Let's see what kind of drivers we can get. And yeah, let's see.
So yeah, we're excited that there are new driver technologies. I'm really interested in hearing this new bone conduction IEM from thieaudio. What's it called again?
Origin.
The Origin. Yeah, hopefully that gets released soon. And thank you for taking the time to speak with us, JP, and for all of your amazing work you do to make our lives a little more enjoyable.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
And best of luck with your PhD program.
Thanks, James.
Thanks for watching this video, and I hope you tune in to see more engaging audio content in the future. This video is brought to you by Linsol.com. I love them because they sell some of the most fun and innovative in-ear monitor products, headphones, DAC amps, cables, generally all kinds of cool stuff that I love listening to and using, and my guess is you probably will too. So check them out in the link below. If you like what you saw in this video, definitely like and subscribe, and feel free to comment. Okay, until next time, thanks for watching.